this evening. I'd like to thank you all for joining us for our Hawaiian Marine Environment Lecture Series, which is always held on the first Thursday of each month at the Hanapeke Library Meeting Room. And today we're so happy to have with us Ruby Papp. And her topic tonight is Managing Kauai's Dynamic Shorelines. Ruby Papp is a coastal land use extension agent with the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College program based on the island of Kauai with the County Planning Department. She works to ensure that the most current scientific and planning information is made available to the Kauai community and readily accessible for coastal zone planning, management, and educational activities. She has a Master of Science degree in Natural Resources Management from the University of Michigan and a BA in Environmental Science from the University of Denver. She was hired by U8 Sea Grant in 2012 after 9 years working in the coastal management field in California and with the California Coastal Commission and the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission. This program is sponsored by the Friends of Hanapeke Public Library, and we wish to thank Jean Souza of the NOAA Hawaiian Islands Whale Marine Sanctuary and Dr. Gordon Lopez of Surfrider Foundation for helping to plan and coordinate this series. And now may I present Ruby Papp.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Can everyone hear me all right? I was asked if I needed a microphone, so let me know when I'll speak up. So thanks so much for having me. This is actually my first speaking engagement since I moved here 5 months ago, so I feel really honored to do this today. Just to give you a quick overview of what I'm going to be discussing today, just a little bit on my background, who Sea Grant is and what our mission is, and then I'll jump right into the main topic, which is shoreline and beach erosion, highlighting the USGS shoreline change report that was recently released and some of the data for Kauai. And then I'll go into some planning and management responses, and then I want to kind of open it up a little and see how Sea Grant can serve you, the community, and obviously there'll be lots of questions and answers, and if it would be better for me, I think, if you held the questions to the end just so we can get through. It's kind of a little meaty, but I think that would work best for me. So just a little bit of my background. Since I've been working on Kauai for only about 5 months, I thought it would be prudent to let you know kind of what brought me here. I've mainly been working in a coastal regulatory capacity in California for the past 9 years. First started off out of grad school working at the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission as a NOAA Coastal Management Fellow, and that was primarily working with stakeholders and on water quality issues at marinas in the Bay. And then I moved on to the Coastal Commission as a coastal planner, they're the main, basically, regulatory agency for California. And my job there was basically evaluating development on the shoreline and in the coastal zone, which often extended up into the mountains in California, and working on a myriad of issues such as growth in communities. Coastal erosion is a big one there, obviously, sensitive habitat protection, wetlands, and also agricultural lands protection, which was a big part of California's coastal program. So this is all to say that I don't have any one, I'm not a specialist, I'm not a geologist, but I do have a lot of experience in kind of applying policies on the ground and assisting counties with their local coastal programs and their plans and their policies for how to protect coastal resources. So you may be wondering why I wanted to move to Kauai and after all that time. And besides the weather being freezing in San Francisco, and I love the tropics and I love tropical islands, and it all kind of started back when I was in undergrad, when I did some field studies courses in the Republic of Palau, and I kind of got the tropical bug, and was studying the coral reefs there and also the terrestrial ecology and the Palauan culture. And then, spent some time in between undergrad and grad school. Lived in Jamaica for a while and then ended up doing my master's work there on solid waste management. And so I really kind of got the island bug and, was fascinated by what the resources are and the resource protections issues are on islands. And I'm really, really humbled and honored that I was able to actually move my life and my career over here and work here. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today, I've had to really do a crash course and get up to speed on the issues here, but I have a great connections, so I'll go in to Sea Grant's mission, which is Sea Grant is based at UH Manoa, and basically supports an innovative program of research, education, and extension services directed to improved understanding and stewardship of coastal and marine resources of the state, region, and nation. And there's other extension agents that are on other islands. There's one on Maui, there's a few on Oahu, and they're all, a lot of them are coastal geologists, coastal process specialists, and great resources. And we have connections with, of course, Chip Fletcher's group in the coastal geology group there too. So we all work really closely together. So the key thing to remember there with the Sea Grant is that we don't advocate for any particular outcome or issue. We're not advocates, but we're neutral purveyors of information. So we assist local communities and provide the scientific data or the planning data that might be needed on certain issues. My position specifically is Coastal Land Use Extension Agent, and the major partner is the County of Kauai. My office is in Lihui, in the P.E. Kauai building at the Civic Center, and focus mainly on coastal hazards mitigation, community resiliency, sustainable coastal development, and healthy coastal ecosystems. So there are a number of coastal management issues that one could talk about, but the one that seems to be the most prevalent and that we see every day and sort of brings a lot of issues close to home on the shoreline is shoreline and beach erosion. And so that's the subject of, I thought it would be, that's the major part of my work here. But it does encompass a lot of other issues. When the beaches erode, you have habitat issues for turtles and monk seals, for example, public access issues, water quality issues. So it has a lot of things enveloped within that overall topic. So for start us off, here's a few slides on Hawaiian beach geology I got from a colleague at Sea Grant, and this is probably review for many of you, but it's just a good way to help me understand the unique system here in Kauai. The sand mostly on Kauai's beaches is carbonate sand, and we have very few black, green, and on Kauai I don't think we have any red sand beaches. We have on Maui, but we do in Waimea have terrigenous sediments on the beach there and Waimea with the volcanic sediment coming down, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the white sand beaches are mainly derived from reworked calcareous debris eroded from the insular reef shelf, so from coral reefs, and to a lesser degree from the inland sediments coming down, which is new for me, fairly new, from being on the mainland where a lot of the beach sediment comes from rivers and streams there. So that's all to say that there is a very limited sediment supply because of where the sand does come from, and so Hawaii beaches are typically narrower than continental beaches. Continental, large continents that have lots of rivers and streams to transport sediment down. So this shows just how sediment can be lost through a littoral system by the seaward transport beyond the reef crest here. We have offshore sand fields, and then through paleo stream channels where there's no reef. And as you know, maybe it's not totally new, but the sand moves in different ways. It can move perpendicular to the shoreline, or it can move parallel to the shoreline. In the swash is what we call wave run-up. So in a light wave activity, swash dominates and sand is moved up the beach face. And then when you have heavy waves, the backwash dominates and drains the sand back into the ocean. And then of course you have the longshore currents, which transport sand up coast and down coast. So erosion is widespread on Hawaii beaches, and the lack of sand has a lot to do with that. Some of the erosion is chronic, which is mainly related to sand deficiencies. And then you have erosion that is temporary or seasonal, where the sand actually ends up returning. And I have some better slides of that, but that just demonstrates, I guess that's an area in West Maui with major seasonal changes. A couple terms to define here. We have beach erosion generally, which is the landward recession of the shoreline over time where the beach is losing sand. We have long-term or chronic shoreline erosion. That means it's been occurring over the centuries, it's been eroding. And then we have short-term, which I just described, which is where there's a temporary shoreline recession due to the natural seasonal fluctuations of waves and tides. But in those cases, the shoreline does typically recover to its former position. And then you have beach accretion. Some of our beaches are actually growing, where over time it's been shown that the beach has been gaining sand over the centuries. So this may seem like a simple question, but why do we care about beach erosion? I'm sure there's a lot of opinions in the audience, but basically, healthy beaches are a vital part of our culture and our environment and our society and the visitor-based economy, obviously. And beach erosion is a hazard to beach access, sensitive habitats, and then also to beachfront property, which is often located on the shoreline here because that's where a lot of our development is concentrated, along the shorelines because of the mountainous terrain. So let's talk a little bit more about the specific types of erosion, because I think it's really important. It was important for me to learn and understand. One common phenomenon is that we say that short-term or seasonal beach erosion. While it can be considered temporary, it still means that things can become threatened and structures can become threatened, and you have the same management issues. So basically the shoreline, this is a normal beach profile here, and then it changes due to seasonal waves and tides. And this is where a healthy beach, it adjusts for the large waves, sand moves offshore, and typically a healthy beach will recover. But you can have temporary major erosion inundation during large wave periods, which can threaten coastal structures and property and other things. This is a graphic of the seasonal waves, and I'm still learning all the various seasons here. Obviously, I told you I've only been here 5 months, but we've got your northern swells, which are typically in the winter, southern swells in the summer, and the trade winds, which since I've been here seems like they've been pretty strong for a while, a majority of the time, and then the Kona storm waves, which are these localized waves, which I don't think I've experienced yet, but maybe you guys could tell me about it. What this I mean, the rules don't necessarily apply to all Hawaiian beaches. There can be a lot of localized trends, and it's really kind of complex. But one beach in particular, Waikiki, is an example that definitely follows the rule. They have nice long period swells in the summer, and that help the beach recover. And then the North Shore, for example, those can be exposed to those major swells in the winter where the beach is significantly narrow. And so here's just a graphic of that. This is actually a North Shore Oahu. This demonstrates the short-term seasonal beach erosion. You have your winter shoreline here and the summer shoreline, which is significantly wider. Now getting more local, slightly different phenomenon of sort of a localized episodic erosion is Wailua Beach. This is an example where basically the sand moves up and down the beach laterally, and you can see it's not according to any like seasonal pattern, but it does start to recover. And this is actually, according to the long-term erosion data, it's considered an accreting beach, but the sand moves around a lot. But you have these chronic episodes which will threaten development. This is actually a parking lot here. You know, real management concerns when that occurs. But just recently, I took a picture last week. You can already see that the beach is starting to return. So this is an area that's pretty interesting. And I know a lot of folks have been talking about it and wondering about it. So it's definitely an area that needs to be monitored and over time. Okay, so we just finished talking about temporary / seasonal erosion, but the majority of Hawaii's beaches are actually experiencing long-term chronic erosion. This means that beach recession has been occurring over decades and centuries. And the data in the study that I'm about to present to you was generated by shoreline studies conducted by researchers at University of Hawaii and many of my colleagues, Fletcher et al. And Romine et al. And it's the stuff that was in the news, and basically in Kauai, 71% of shorelines are eroding at a rate of 0.11 meters per year. Oops, I'm supposed to. And this similarly, 8% of the extent of Kauai's beaches have been lost over the last century, or 6 kilometers. And nearly all the beaches lost were those that were in front of coastal armoring, or seawalls, revetments, things like that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And this is actually, this is just a graphic that kind of demonstrates that coastal armoring phenomenon where your beach is lost, where the land is stabilized, your development is protected, but your beach is lost, as opposed to where it's unstabilized and beach is preserved. So getting into this study, the results of the shoreline change study that was conducted by Fletcher and Romine et al. at UH contributed to this national assessment by the United States Geologic Service of historical shoreline change. And they do this across the US, and this was a specific episode for Hawaii, and they're supposed to, I think, update this every 5 to 10 years. So this report actually has a lot of really detailed, good information in it, and I couldn't possibly do it justice here. But I'm going to do my best attempt to provide you with the highlights and things you might be interested in. And then, but if you're interested in this subject, I definitely recommend, I have a hard copy here, but the URL is right here. I don't know if you can see that, or you can just Google it. I Google everything these days because I can never remember URLs, so it comes right up. So, and it's not too long, but it is a little dense. So I'm going to show you the highlights here. So the first thing to explain is the methodology for determining the long-term erosion rates. Basically, the historical shoreline positions along the coast were mapped from aerial photographs, and the changes in shoreline position were measured over time. And for Kauai, the historical shoreline data dates back to 1926. And so these shoreline change rate maps were funded by each county. So I don't think the Big Island has them, but I believe, I know Kauai does, Maui has them, and Oahu. And as I'll get into in a little while, they support science-based decisions in terms of managing your development on the shoreline. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. That's a really good question. So the red, you're going to start to see a lot of these maps, and the red means erosion and the rate of erosion, and the blue will mean accretion. So 195 is the transect. These are transects that they took. They took transects up along the shoreline, and then they measured historical. They looked at the historical photos and were able to do their magic and determine the shoreline erosion rates. Okay. So the shoreline change report divided the island into 4 areas, basically, and it's a nice way to kind of present the highlights to you without going into each and every beach. And Table 6 is a really does a nice job of summarizing the shorelines that have the maximum amount of erosion in each geographic area and those that have the maximum amount of accretion. So the ones that are eroding a lot, ones that are growing. And so, so we have, just let you look at that north, east, south, west here. You have your long-term rates here. I don't know if you can see that. And the beaches that are experiencing maximum erosion and maximum accretion. And I'll just go into some of those in detail right now so you don't have to squint and look at the slide. So on the west side, which is very relevant to here, just down the road, we have O'omanu, west side Kikia'ola Harbor. This area is experiencing the maximum erosion for the west side out of all the beaches. And yeah, you see this large amount right here. It's at 1.4 meters per year long-term erosion rate. Yeah, that's right. So this was taken recently. This just demonstrates the major erosion that's been occurring there. And then interestingly, if you go on the other side of the harbor, you have the maximum amount of accretion for the south side. Actually, for the way that they divided this up, this section landed in the south side for whatever reason, but if you look at the number, it's the same. It's 1.4 meters per year of a beach growing on the east side of Kikia'ola Harbor. And you can see here's all the sediment that's basically trapped by the harbor there. And here's a good aerial photo. This was taken by County of Kauai in 2011 that shows that phenomenon pretty well. And this is fairly well acknowledged by even my statement about the harbor. I mean, I know there's been a lot of conversation about this recently. It's fairly well acknowledged that the harbor is causing this issue. And my understanding is that DOBOR, and I don't know what that acronym stands for, but they manage the boating of the harbor, they are going to be undergoing a sand bypass project, whereby they're required to actually truck this sand over to this side and do beach nourishment. And that, I don't know if that was, I think that might have been a condition of the Army Corps. I don't know the details, but it's been something that's been brewing for quite some time, and they're still. So in the absence of, what are the other options? You take out the harbor, is that going to happen? The decision was made that they would do the sand bypassing to address that. Okay, so just moving on to other sides of the island to get a good picture of what's happening. Here's, let's see, where are we? On the east side, actually the area that's experiencing the maximum amount of erosion can be seen at the west end of Aliamano Beach here. And here you see the erosion bars here. And this is actually an area where a home had to be removed in 2009 because of the high rates of erosion there. On the north shore, you have Hanalei Bay, which is experiencing the maximum amount of accretion over the long term. Hanalei Bay is really interesting. The main source of the sediment is the fringing reef. There's a large reef east of Hanalei that goes all the way to Kilauea, and the dominant transport of sand is to the west, so into the bay. There's other source of sediment in the Hanalei River itself, and that deposits terrestrial sediment on the beach. And so when you go out to the beach there, you'll see that the color of the sand is slightly darker. There's different colors than neighboring carbonate beaches. So this is the maximally accreting beach on the north shore. If you're interested at all in Hanalei Bay, there's been dissertations and theses done on the accretion rates there and why they're occurring, and they're all on the coastal geology website at UH. The maximum amount of erosion on the north shore is occurring at Haena Point, which is, it's at the corner of this map, but you can see again the erosion bars there, and it's eroding at an approximate rate of 0.7 meters per year. This is an area that is, from a management perspective, it's developed with a lot of large, expensive homes. It's not very dense, but you've got these expensive homes. A lot of them are vacation rentals. They're trying to build as close to the shoreline as possible. A lot of them don't live there full time, so it's an interesting area. It's also one of the most popular recreation areas, as you know, one of the most beautiful beaches I've ever been to. But actually, as my colleague pointed out, while my colleague Dolan Eversole, who's been here probably many of you know him, he pointed out to me that while the erosion rates are concerning, the north-facing beach is also very susceptible to tsunamis. And so if you're worried about erosion, wait till a tsunami comes. And that's why you see a lot of the homes in that area are built up on piers because of the flooding risk from tsunamis. And all those shoreline change maps that I showed you with the red bars and the blue bars are found online at this URL here. And I left my cards up front, so if ever anyone wants to discuss with me like a particular shoreline, it's pretty easy. You can just click on an area that you're interested in and then check out the erosion rates, and they have really neat explanations as well. And I'm always available to answer questions, or if I don't know, I can talk to somebody who does and who actually worked on the map. So it's a really neat tool. So getting into the management options and the planning options, which is an area that I am a little more familiar with. This is occurring nationally, probably internationally, what to do when structures are threatened by erosion and other hazards. You could do nothing, and just allow the natural shoreline migration to occur. And this would probably require abandoning structures or tearing them down, or what we call managed retreat, which is moving those structures out of harm's way and moving back. Other options are beach replenishment or dune restoration. You have temporary erosion control, like these geobags or sandbags. And then you have the real hard stabilization, the permanent erosion control, so your rock revetments and seawalls. So just going into a little detail on those. Again, this is just illustrating, this is the same example I showed in Aliamano, an example of abandonment where you have this house on an extremely eroding shoreline. Interesting, you have seawalls on either side, and then it's sort of teetering on the edge there as the erosion goes at it. And then this happened in 2009. This photo was taken by my predecessor, Jim O'Connell. It's this sort of progression of what happened in '09. So there's an example of abandonment. That's one way to deal with it. Then there's beach replenishment, or what we call beach nourishment, and beach maintenance. This is a nice soft option in that if done correctly, with appropriate sand and maintained over time, you can avoid, you can really create a nice buffer there from the waves and from the hazards. The problems that have been encountered are that it's very expensive and we have limited sand resources. You can't just go and steal sand from one beach and bring it onto another beach. That's highly illegal. So you have to look for sand resources that are nearby or usually in the same littoral cell, that are compatible with the environment, that don't have a high fines content that could cause water quality problems. And that maintenance is also required. I mean, you have to oftentimes keep maintaining the beach. But in certain areas, this has been done, especially in Waikiki. I mean, you think about it, Waikiki Beach is very, very popular, very historical significance. And so everybody got together there and said, we're going to nourish the beach, we're losing our beaches. So you've probably read about that in the paper. The project was recently completed. And then this over here is an example in Kailua where they actually did an effort of pushing the sand from the river mouth back onto the beach. So the sand was already there, but it was called sand pushing. So basically, but it is expensive, and it really does take somebody needs to really take the lead and ownership of the project. And there are some permitting challenges. You need to go look at your water quality impacts, go through Department of Health and the Army Corps of Engineers. But there are some streamlining permit processes through the Office of Coastal Lands for smaller scale beach nourishment projects, because they do want to promote these alternative types of measures, which can be it can work well if done well. In Kauai, my understanding is there are a few sand sources. So off of Kapa'a, there was a recent study documenting some sand fields out there, and then off of Poipu. And there are some beach nourishment efforts that are sort of in the planning stages. One by county parks for Poipu Beach, which I do believe they tried to do this there a few years ago with sort of limited success. They had some issues with the sand source, which was taken from Kauai Bird Sanctuary in Mana, and it wasn't. We now know that sand needs to be washed, and so that it's more compatible with the area. There's another effort I'm aware of, private firm looking at nourishing the Kukui'ula harbor. Those are the two that I know of on Kauai. So interesting. So we also have what we call temporary erosion control. These are your sandbags, and over here these biodegradable bags and blankets. These are really just a Band-Aid fix, considered temporary until a more permanent, quote-unquote, permanent solution can be found. And while they can work for some time, like if they're really temporary, like for example, put in when the beach is seasonally really low and then taken out in the summertime and allow the beach to be brought back, can work. But I think in practice what occurs is they get put in often and they get left in, and they have a lot of the same impacts that seawalls do. You can see a narrowing beach here with impacts to public access, obviously impacts to habitat, and perhaps causing downstream erosion on the ends. So you're still, in the end, you're left with a chronic erosion problem in these areas. And then we have the hard structures, which we've already discussed. They do contribute to beach loss. On many Hawaii beaches, the response has been to armor beachfront property, and Hawaii is not alone. This is the natural response. I think everywhere you go. We could talk for a while on why that is, but it just sort of, you've got coastal properties that are threatened. Okay, what can you do to defend yourself? Well, let's put in a hard wall. And there's a lot of engineers that have figured out how to do that. But it has shown to contribute to beach narrowing and loss in Hawaii. Specifically, there are a couple studies done by Romine and Fletcher et al. On Oahu. So it's fairly well documented. And this next slide just shows why that happens. So you have, for a beach that's like free of human interference, the beach will simply migrate landward and will keep its beach width. There's nothing to stop it from doing its natural thing. When the landward edge of a beach is fixed with a seawall, the beach will continue to try to migrate landward, so the water line will continue to go in, and then eventually the sand gets scoured out and the beach is eventually lost. And this is a graphic from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So obviously I've mentioned this, but I'll mention it again. I mean, you lose your beach, you lose your public access, loss of habitats, and huge economic impacts for the visitor industry here. And then I would also add that based on my experience in California, these aren't permanent. Eventually your property is going to be threatened again, and you're going to spend more money on more seawall, and it's a constant maintenance, and it's just a reality that I think shoreline property owners really need to look at and weigh the cost benefits of doing that sort of measure. So here's a local example of a seawall with a loss of beach in Kapa'a, Ponokai. And then nearby, we have Kaumali'i Highway, which I know many of us have been talking about and observing. Actually, this photo doesn't show I've seen some dramatic photos where it's like weeping, the water's washing over the revetment. So this is a really interesting case, and I'm no expert, but I've been talking to my colleagues in Seagran and at UH a lot about this. We've had countless meetings just because there is a DOT project going on up here that I'll get to in a second. But the revetment was placed in 1982 after Hurricane Eva. And this is a picture from just last month, where there's no beach there, obviously. This is a picture from 2005, and I'm sure many of you have other pictures that may be even better that show a healthy beach, even in front of the revetment, and sometimes the revetment is totally covered with sand. So I didn't have a lot of those photos, but anyway. Moving on to just in mid-July, this is at the end of that revetment near a mile marker, is it 27? The highway became threatened by this common phenomenon known as flanking erosion. There's my thing. Or end scour, which is common at the end of a shoreline protective device. You just start to get erosion at the ends. So according to the shoreline erosion maps, which I'm not able to show the Kikaha one here because for whatever reason it was huge. It was a huge file and it was going to make my PowerPoint crash, but it's I don't know why that one was so large, but a lot of good data, obviously. But according to those maps, this area is eroding at a rate of about 1 foot per year chronically. But it's also highly variable in shorter time spans. So you have some seasonal and interannual changes there. So for example, in 1975, there was a shoreline shown on that map that actually shows, that was even before the revetment was placed, that the shoreline was actually right up against the road. So this has happened before. So the question is, is the beach going to return? And my colleagues think that, based on that variability in the beach widths observed, maybe it's likely that the beach may eventually recover some or all of its former width. And that's because they note the area is dominated by seasonal longshore transport of sediment from the east to the west. So maybe up in Barking Sands or Polyholly. And so when the swells change and the season changes, will that, the sand might be brought back down this winter. It would be really, really interesting to see, and it's just an area that we're watching very closely. But is it what?
West of Kikiaola.
Yeah. It's, yeah, so just further up is MacArthur Park, and here's another view of that. So as a response to that, DOT first put in sandbags as a temporary measure. And as you can see, they were still, we were getting hammered really hard, and I think still are, by that erosion. And then just last week, they started putting in these, what do you call, drilled, 3 foot diameter drilled shafts is what I believe what they're trying to do, which is they're drilling these shafts in between the road and the beach in an attempt to protect the road. And I'm not sure how long. They did this under emergency declaration, so there's not a lot of documents that one can review to look at these things. But I think it's going to, I think they said about 300 feet. When I talked to the engineer at DOT, this was about a month ago. I wasn't able to get really good pictures because it was raining when I was out there. 300 feet laterally, drilled, hopefully drilled into the sand so you won't see it.
300 foot pylons?
No, it'll be 300 feet long in length. But I don't know if that's what they're doing. That was a conversation that I had with them.
So this is sort of like
To protect the road. It acts as a retaining wall for the road. Yeah. Right next to each other. Right, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, don't quote me on that because I don't know if there's any specs or plans out there for public review because this was done under emergency declaration. So what else do I want to say about these? I mean, obviously we do have a major, you have a critical infrastructure being threatened here, so something needs to be done. Another thing to consider in the long term could maybe be something like this. And I put a big question mark because is this something that the community would be interested in? I'm new here, I don't know, I just bring it up. It looks like there's plenty of room to move the highway inland. With a long-term vision, maybe this could be turned into a beach park. Maybe the beach could be restored here. Really depends on how safe this front row of development is from erosion. But you do see where the road, the road is along the shoreline for a few miles, but then it cuts inland. So most of the time it is inland. So it wouldn't be too off the wall to think that it could somehow, I mean, obviously managed retreat, I have not seen many examples of it occurring. I mean, it requires a planning process that involves the entire community, all stakeholders. You need an agency that's willing to take the lead on that. But it is just, as it is an option that I think ought to be discussed here and elsewhere where you do have critical infrastructure right along the shoreline. I don't know, you have to look at all the other impacts too, but it's an idea and it's an interesting illustration, I think, of what could occur, which would, it would be a measure to protect your road, but also protect your beach. Obviously, it's something long-term.
Take the rock wall out, and is that what you're kind of proposing?
It would be, I'm just saying, I'm not proposing any, I'm saying.
No, but I mean, is that kind of the thing that it kind of goes along as a combination? You put the road in the back, and then you take the road.
There's a lot of alternatives that could be looked at, right? You could look at it like that. Or you could leave the wall in and see if the beach comes back, and then turn the road into a trail, maybe. Or you could, I mean, there's a lot of potential options, and I think just it kind of speaks to, the idea that, these conversations need to start happening. There need to be, I think, public processes where you start to look at what are all the alternatives about that. Oh yeah, that's a good segue into, so what I've been talking about right now is like, how do you respond to threats to existing development? You've already developed near the shoreline, oops, now it's eroding. But there's really a lot of opportunities for planning for new development. The best way to protect new coastal properties and beaches is to build way back from the shoreline. That includes structures, and it also includes when you're planning out subdivisions. I mean, I don't know how many more subdivisions are going to occur on the shoreline in Kauai, but I mean, it's really important to do it at that stage because that's when you're deciding how large your lots are going to be and where your building pads are going to be. Also at the zoning stage, if there's any rezoning to more dense development, or if the county or community wants to look at certain areas that they want to downzone, that's always important to look at. What are the hazards, not just erosion, but tsunami, flooding, everything there. So for most coastal states do employ these shoreline erosion rate-based formulas to determine where to set back development from the shoreline. And Kauai is no exception, as you may know. They have a very, very strong shoreline setback ordinance, which requires new structures to be set back either 70 or 100 times the annual erosion rate, and then you add 40 feet to that. So you take those maps that I showed you, and you take the erosion rates, and you apply that formula, and ideally that's where your structure gets sited. So that is the current ordinance that is now in effect for new development on Kauai shorelines. So, other important planning documents, if this interests you, Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 205A, that's the Hawaii's coastal management law, basically provides the backbone for the shoreline setbacks and the special management area rules that Kauai has for development located in the special management area. A really good resource also is the Hawaii Coastal Erosion Management Plan by DLNR. It's got a lot of alternatives and great options in there that they are currently considering. They're currently the statewide lead on shoreline issues, and there are 2 colleagues of mine at Sea Grant that actually are partnered with that agency. Another tool that is available are beach management plans. These are where a community will take a specific beach that they live near and care a lot about and sort of identify all the issues and do a planning effort around it. And there have been beach management plans done in Kailua Beach and Oahu. And it could be any issue. It could be public access, could be vegetation, could be erosion, could be a whole gamut of things, but it's just basically looking at doing a comprehensive planning effort for a specific beach area. And then another area to get involved with is, updates to the general plans, special development plans, and zoning ordinances to make sure that hazards, coastal erosion, and all the issues are reflected for your community. I would also like to emphasize again that coastal erosion isn't, it's one of a whole host of hazards that are along the shoreline, and as you all know, living here, I've probably experienced the flooding from inland sources, tsunamis, hurricanes, and so they're all of these put together need to be looked at as one and sort of under the rubric of our community resiliency. How resilient are we as a community? How resilient are our natural resources? Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about sea level rise, sort of as food for thought, because I'm about to get a lot more into this through my work here with Sea Grant. So recent publications dating back to about 2007 indicate generally that sea level rise will rise 1 meter by the end of the century. And these blue bars are just the various studies that have been conducted. Could be more, could be less. The yellow is the 1 meter sort of consensus, I guess, current thinking on the sea level rise. But the relationship between the rise in sea level and shoreline change / erosion is not yet well understood. So there are a lot of researchers that they've developed some mathematical models on how to see how the shorelines might behave as the sea level rises. But we haven't really had enough time to observe the effects extensively in the natural world. I mean, we've seen areas that are being inundated by sea level rise, right? Like Tuvalu, for example, and some areas in Alaska. But how that rise in sea level relates to the erosion rates, like are they going to make them, how much quicker is the shoreline going to be erode? Where's your maximum wave run up going to be? That's under development right now. But Hawaii is a good laboratory in which to investigate these relationships, and researchers are working on that. As part of my work here, I will be heading up a team of other extension agents at Sea Grant to do a sea level rise analysis for Kauai. The intent is to inform the general plan update, which I believe is going to be kicking into gear next year. And so I'll be working on that, so stay tuned. Also, generally, what I'll be doing is working on assisting the county with implementation issues and amendments to the shoreline setback ordinance as they come up, especially when we do have more information on options for sea level rise. That ordinance may need to be amended. Other efforts, beach profiling and monitoring. I'm going to be starting up a program here fairly soon. The beach profiling actually looks at, gets a little more detail on the beach and takes a profile of targeted beaches around the island to get a better sense of how they're behaving. And this is an extension of work that's being done on other islands through UH. And so I'll be extending that work to Kauai. And then another one that's been needed for quite a while is a shoreline armoring geographic information systems database where we know exactly where all the seawalls are and we can see them on a map for planning purposes and for the community's use. So you can begin to look at, where are they serving their purpose, are there areas where they should be taken out or looked at more closely. And so one of the things I wanted to pose to you is, since I am so new here, is I have been doing a lot of outreach to individuals, but what do you see as some other community needs that Sea Grant may be able to assist with in terms of research and planning processes and products? So I'll leave it at that and see if there was. No. And then thank you very much. I had fun and appreciated your attention. So ready for questions. I'll do the best I can to answer them. Hi. Yes. Hi.
A big mass of logs coming down the river, that shoreline and erosion. I mean, big masses. So when there's a big storm, that we've seen it in my
Yeah.
the whole river was full of logs coming out to sea. Would that affect erosion?
I think it probably could. I mean,
Hard surface, right?
yeah, I mean, especially you got to look at where those, the logs land and,
I'll just red flag you because we have the albesias that are
Yeah.
invasive,
Uh-huh.
and they are the logs that are coming down at the Wailoa River.
Yeah.
They're very soft, they fall into the water, and they're coming out. If you look along the shoreline,
Yeah.
there's big logs.
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah, they're not stacked really close together. They're still allowing the waves to come in and out, but they're there, and there's a lot of them. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you've also got Lidgate Pond, which is right there, and yeah.
So I just want to red flag you guys to watch out for that, because I walk along that coast. If no
Yeah,
one is
sure.
taking the logs out,
Yeah.
it's going to become a hard.
I'll definitely ask that question too to my colleagues to see what they think about whether there's erosion impact. I know there's other impacts with having invasive logs coming down the watershed and covering the beaches, so, yeah. Yes.
I noticed you had vertical parallel seasonal changes. How about the fresh water coming out of the rivers and streams and things? How does the behavior with the salt water, the sand, and the fresh water?
You mean in terms of erosion or?
Because they are the state of matter, how they behave from the littlest to the greatest, behavior according to the manifestation of laws, science laws.
I'm not sure I heard the last part of what you just said.
You had,
You want me to go back to the slide?
no, you don't,
Okay.
I remember.
Okay. Well, I might need to refresh my memory.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. It's in the beginning where you had the seasonal vertical parallel.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I think one thing I can point you to, and I'm not an expert.
This seasonal,
Yeah, I'll show
sea
you.
level also, you have to go on a specific ocean sea level.
Right.
You cannot base on the glaciers melting.
Yeah. So.
Equate that quantity of water to your level of its rising. You
Yeah,
have
in
to base it on a specific ocean sea level.
Yeah. So in terms of for Hawaii, I do realize that they've seen. Well, so according to the Nowilly Willy buoys, the sea level's been rising here approximately 1.5.
You have to
Millimeters
base
per
it
year.
also on the displacement factor of matter.
Mhm.
You have solid matter and
Yeah.
some of it change to gas.
Yeah.
So it's not in the ocean. Like if you take out 50 billion barrels beneath sea level, below sea level, and it's occupied with what? When you take out the crude oil. It
Right.
has to be replaced with something. You cannot just have a cavern with nothing. So what replace it? So it's called the displacement.
You're talking about crude oil?
Yeah.
Sea oil? The oil is not a pool down there, that's in rock.
Water replaces the oil.
So if it replaces the oil and you burn your gas, so the gas and particles occupy your atmosphere. So where does this ocean water go? Where does this water come from to replace this 50 billion?
Yeah, I
You
don't have
have
that
to know this
information.
displacement factor because you cannot understand the state of what you are in. You cannot,
Okay.
because there's only one water.
But you can measure it.
That's what I'm saying. There's only one water.
So the first question you're asking about the rivers and
Okay.
yeah, I just want to show you, you know, I'm not, again, I'm not a geologist, but there are a couple areas where you have accretion occurring around
This
the
goes
rivers.
further back, up to
And
the
one of
front.
them, what kind of side for Alimano?
Further forward.
So here you
Further
have,
forward. You have to go further to the beginning.
okay, so maybe I'm not answering your question then.
Well, I think that would be just showing. Yeah, because they have the screen. Show the.
Yeah, I mean, in Anahola Bay, there is
No,
quite a
you
bit
had
of
a,
accretion happening here, and it's probably partly due to the stream here.
you have to go back to the place where you
Okay,
had
so your
parallel,
question,
vertical, seasonal.
Okay, yeah.
Then you can have an illustration of
Yeah.
pictures, you know,
yeah.
unless you don't want to, that's your business, I don't really care, you know.
Oh, you don't care? Okay.
I
Go
don't
ahead,
really
Matt.
care, I just came here to, you know, want my input, I don't really care. I talk about this kind of things, so many different things for years, you know,
Okay.
So they might actually,
Yeah.
Albizia shouldn't be here, but just woody debris been on our beaches for approximately 4.5 million years, and
Yeah.
they will continue to be there. But it is an issue is when you divert virtually all the water out of the river or stream, then you're not having all of that fine sediment, basalt sediment
It's the last
being
slide.
discharged as much. Okay, so you want to go on that slide and not your work plan, okay?
No, I'm getting
Go
there.
back.
I was trying to do it.
So you're asking me to add that to my work plan?
No, I was gonna, just your work plan would have reminded me the other things
Yeah,
that.
let's
One
go.
of, some of these I'm not real familiar with, I think Chuck probably knows more about the Kauai erosion than I do. But one of the classic ones that's not on your slideshow is front of the Kauai swimming pool. That's been falling in the ocean since
Yeah.
1947,
Uh-huh.
when the Army Corps of Engineers
Coral.
excavated coral out of there that's about 300 meters long, 10
Okay.
feet deep and 10 feet wide. That could be filled up and live corals transplanted on top of it.
Oh.
We could solve that one.
Mhm.
The other part that's causing that erosion at the swimming pool, besides that big groove cut in the reef that traps longshore sand and then funnels it right out into the submarine canyon where it never comes back. Aside from that, it's those jaws at Moikeha Canal, the two little jetties that stick out. That blocks longshore movement.
Right.
It moves south in the winter,
Okay.
north in the summer,
Yeah.
and it shovels it right offshore and it's gone.
Right.
Never on its way to Molokai, and of course it never.
Well, there was a sea engineering report that was done for Public Works this past year that looked at that, the offshore sand deposits off Kauai, and they're pretty extensive and available.
They
So they're
are,
not gone.
No, once
Yeah.
they fall into the submarine canyon, they're gone.
Well, they're available for if they want to take them out and do some beach nourishment.
Well, that costs
Yeah.
money. Mother Nature will do it all on her own if you just restore it.
Yeah, you mean, you're just talking about
Filling
reconfiguring
in
the
the
shoreline?
wound,
Yeah,
planting corals, getting rid of those jetties
interesting, yeah.
that stop longshore
Uh-huh.
movement north and south.
Yeah, these are all, yeah, just various options. Yeah, you're talking about restoration, which I didn't really touch on that much here, so that's really good point. Sure.
I was just wondering if you guys do much on, with the meteorology on the long term, the diurnal cycle up in the North Pacific. As a surfer, you kind of get into these long-term forecasts for waves and historical amount of North Shore activity, which right now we're looking at almost historical amounts of sand up on that Majors Bay Park and Sand area right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And it's going to take these large northwest and west swells, especially the west swells, which we haven't had any west swells in many, many years. But
Okay.
there's a diurnal cycles, I think that's what it's called, that are 10 to 20 year cycles of either, above average, which we just got through with in 94 or something. Then it's gone into a below average cycle. And right now, in the last 3 years, we've had incredibly low amounts of northwest and west swells. In
Okay.
fact, we haven't even had a 270 swell, of anything.
Yeah.
Any great amount. And I just was wondering if you guys, in your big powwows, if
Yeah.
you guys get together and you talk about this, because of the fact that we're such a round island,
Right.
like the whole Kala'au thing is a little bit different because it goes in and out, but at least on the west side, it shifts with the two different seasons, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no, I mean, we have talked about that, maybe not that specific term, you mentioned the diurnal, but the seasonal variability of the west
how do you
side.
pronounce it again? Diurnal?
Yeah, I don't know.
Diurnal.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. So
I don't even-
Diurnal, oscillating diurnal cycle?
That was so on.
Something like
I-
that. Anyways, I was trying to get the term too, but
The cable.
something like that, is that it?
Yeah, it's not something I'm familiar with, but that area is, has been, when they did do the shoreline change maps, it's extremely variable on that west side because of how that sand gets moved back and forth. So you can see it in the shoreline change rates and the sort of the margins of error that occur,
Yeah.
because when you look at a winter beach and a summer beach, it's totally different, and depends on when your aerial photo was taken, and if you have just only winter beaches for certain years or summer beaches. So it's complex, and so that said,
Well, it's amazing how
Yeah.
fast it comes back. I mean, it'll come all the way down there to intersections
Yeah.
and in a month of big surf, just incredibly quickly. I mean,
100 yards almost.
yeah.
yeah, sure.
Yes, I have two comments. First of all, one is on terminology dealing with the USGS report. It's a big problem, in that they don't differentiate between shoreline erosion and shoreline retreat. You understand? You talk about retreat, but if the entire beach moves landward,
Yeah.
that's not erosion, because the whole beach is still intact. But tran-
Sure.
no, transpiration.
I call it
Sea level
retreat
moving.
if it moves.
And that happens normally if the shoreline is not armored or
Sure.
blocked. Right?
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
normal process.
Yeah.
On Kauai, we see that happening quite a bit. But in the report, they report that as erosion, which is erroneous, because the beach is not eroding, it's just moving landward. But the reason is because of the approach. What they did is they took the different air photographs, and the only part of the beach that could be recorded easily on those photographs and maps was the surf zone. It's very difficult to indicate where the back of the beach is.
I think they
So
use
they don't-
vegetation line too. in
Well,
some
they
cases.
didn't do that. In this study, they ignored that, and they only took account of the beach, and if that moved
Yeah.
landward, that's called erosion. But the entire beach is moving, the vegetation line is also moving landward, That's retreat, that's not erosion.
Ah.
And it's critical because erosion is a very, embroiling word. You can say
Yeah.
erosion.
Yeah.
But if the entire beach is moving landward,
Yeah.
it's just the beach is moving landward. You may be losing part of your landward area, but you're not losing the beach.
But when you become a seamount though, and there's no more landward,
Well,
you're eroded.
but regardless of
It's
whether,
eroded. When you become a seamount, and it's completely gone, that's eroded.
Then we'll build houseboats.
Oh, it will be after
it
we
seems
do.
to me that
You're
whether
removing
it's,
the land, you're not removing the beach. We're talking about beach erosion here versus retreat,
but,
Oh,
not
okay.
land erosion.
Okay.
Beach.
Well, I think
It
what
says
it's
beach erosion.
specifically
Okay.
talking
I
about
understand.
shoreline,
Okay, so that
shoreline
needs to be-
change.
That needs to be,
was
I
the- Yeah,
communicated with Chip about this.
yeah, yeah.
And he just says, no, we just call it all erosion, which is incorrect. That's what a geomorphologist like Fletcher does, sedimentologist, think.
Yeah.
So that's a big problem in Kauai because using the Oahu model, where most of the shoreline is armored because there's so much development. In Kauai, we have many places that get restricted. But they're reporting, 71% of the shoreline is eroded. That's incorrect because they're not taking into account the whole beach. The other problem with the study is they don't look at sand composition in much detail. So their classification of beaches is extremely naive. And the third thing is that our beaches are extremely different from one part of the island to the other. The whole northeast and south are indented shorelines that are a result of sea level change over the last many thousands of years, coastal sea level change. And so most of the beaches are bayhead beaches inside of drowned river valleys. The west side is all longshore drift. And part of that is coming from the west to the east, and the other part's coming from Waimea River from the east to the west. And it converges. And that convergence point is right near the problem we have with Kauai Beach. It's right over Mono Point is the body line. And that's a natural barrier. There's never been any white sand get down towards Waimea. There's never been any volcanic sand that's got up to Kauai.
Right.
It's about a quarter of a mile of zone there, which goes back and forth a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, Kauai Beach is right at the very end of the sand that comes from Hyannis, all the way along the Pali, all the way around Holy Holly, and all the way to Mono Point. Now, we were talking about, we don't have a big North Shore swell which wraps all the way around the island. It's not a west swell, it's a North Shore. It wraps all the way around the island. If that is weak, then that sand is going to get hung up in PMRF somewhere, and that's where it is right now in Majors Bay. Now, if we have a strong south swell in our winter, then that's going to move the sand back the other direction. So right now, in the 1970s, the people were threatening to blow up the harbor because they thought that was blocking, because Kauai Beach disappeared in the 70s, as you mentioned. But it came back.
Right.
Now, whether it's going to come back again or not depends a lot on energy bouncing off those revetments. It's going to make it more difficult for the sand to deposit.
Yeah.
So that's the problem on the west side, is it's a natural phenomenon. It's not caused by Kikiola Harbor, because that sand never gets down there.
Not at the end where the revetment is, yeah, but.
No, even in front of St. Teresa's Church.
Right. The area to the west of O'Omano Point is, my understanding is a distinct.
West of O'Omano
versus the-
Point is all sand that comes from Hyannis,
Yeah,
all the way around the
yeah,
island.
exactly. And then, but
And
the
east
area
of there
east of
towards
that.
Waimea comes from Waimea Beach. And the harbor is its own little problem, but it's not a Kauai Beach problem.
No, and I hope I didn't say that. I don't think I did.
No, I don't think
No,
you did,
no.
but some people in here probably think.
Oh, right,
And
yeah.
a lot of
yeah.
people have said it.
Yeah.
But it's
Well,
the
it
most,
is it's a distinct, it's a separate
it's
system.
one of the
Yeah.
simplest shoreline things in the world.
Yeah,
You've got volcanic sand on one side and carbonate
Yeah.
sand on the other side.
exactly.
It's black and white.
Agreed. Yeah.
so they would, if you took the seawall out, will the beach retreat? Or the road?
Well, you've got a road right there, and I don't know what's under the
I don't
road.
care about that road.
What road?
What's the question?
If you took
If
the
you
seawall out,
took
would
the
the beach
seawall out, what would
retreat?
happen?
I mean,
Yes.
I don't know what kind of infrastructure is underneath that road. I mean, is there
Eventually,
sewer tunnels? I
eventually
mean, I
it's
think
gonna be
there's other.
undermined.
Yeah.
It's all sand.
If this
You
keeps
go-
up, it's not too far.
But I'm saying some of that stuff could act as a barrier too,
If
so.
you go to the
just simply-
cemetery that's on the
I
northern
know.
side of the road,
Yeah.
you see where the graves are dug up? It's all white sand. That used to be beach. And if so, if you take the road out and the revetment out, that beach will probably just move landward. I don't know what to say about St. Teresa's Church.
Yeah, exactly.
All the houses that are built
Yeah.
there, they're gonna have problems.
If you're looking too short term, because long term, I mean, the beach is gonna come back, because it's all up there in Gators Bay. I mean, and then when you say that, up there, Noheli Point is an area where it breaks too, because there's no sand in Noheli Point for quite a distance between Holy Holly and.
That's because it's all along there.
So it's really, it's those 290 to 270 swells that really push that stuff down. At north and northwest, it takes a much larger swell to get to move as much as you do.
But it will.
A few degrees,
Come all
it
the way
will.
along.
Did you have a question? Sorry, we're gonna
I just wondered,
Yeah.
whether it's erosion or retreat, doesn't it make sense that we don't inhabit that area? That we have a
Exactly.
setback.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Back up.
We back up,
Totally.
they've shown it in North Carolina, Orange County, this stuff,
That's right.
this is what shorelines do, so I remember living in Puerto Rico, there was a Spanish law and a Puerto Rican law and a US law, and people did whatever they wanted.
We had
to-
those.
Right, so, you really know, according to law, we can be 10 meters away, we can take away the dunes, and others, it was smarter, the Spanish law was something like 500 meters in, it was like ridiculous to people who wanted to live by the beach, but it was spot on.
Well, you're totally correct. I mean, you have to retreat if you want to do a natural thing. But
And
for the
so,
seawall up there, the sand will go somewhere else.
yeah.
But nobody complains about too much sand on the beach.
Look
So
at
that's
the-
not a problem.
Look at the Hyatt during the
question,
hurricane.
yes.
So, I'm wondering if the study, I haven't read the study.
Okay.
I'm wondering if they have made use of either LiDAR data or any detailed bathymetry data that might show up historically in features in the nearshore geometry.
You know,
that are changing.
you'd probably be able to speak to that
Not an
better.
issue.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's being used in other efforts, but this was, I think, just aerial photos, two sheets.
It's all air photographs from
Yeah.
1927.
Yeah.
But that would be a suggestion.
Yeah, and this-
Maybe a mysterious kind of cause that you don't know why it's happening.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the geometry of the ocean bottom
Right.
in that area.
Right, and that just speaks to like the, the type of data that we have out there, and, it's always, there's other ways of investigating, shoreline retreat, erosion, whatever you want to call it,
What
and,
that gets to
you know-
basically is that every beach is a different problem. There are
yeah,
no two beaches on this island that are the same.
yeah.
And you can't just use
Yeah.
a general approach.
Well, and where in California, which is totally different than here, I get that, but where they don't have these maps for in the regulatory setting there for each project that I worked on. They had to hire a consultant and do a very detailed analysis of that particular area. But you
Is there a
have to
plan
look,
for that here?
no, am I what?
Is there a plan for that?
I don't know. I mean, you kind of have to look at the reality, and I think it's a really big step that Kauai has taken and embraced this data, and they're now using shoreline rates in the setbacks. I think that's a big step. You have to look at the institutional structure and
So the planning
what-
commission needs to be approached about the setbacks and to put a moratorium on. Yeah. In certain areas.
Kauai's been really good about that. We're probably the leader in the
yeah, I mean,
state. in
there's
terms of
a
setbacks.
it's a pretty good ordinance. I mean, I think what you're getting at is some issues with the data and like some of the terminology, but I think it's
Which
Pretty-
confuses them.
But that's important in terms of
Yeah.
public, interaction.
understanding and yeah.
So,
But
the bottom line numbers in this report, it's probably not very correct.
well, this report, but what about just the maps themselves that show the rates of
They
erosion
show
over
the
time?
front of the beach moving,
Okay.
but you need to talk about, again, the whole beach, not just the front.
Okay, but you still have an estimate of erosion rates that you can calculate conservative setbacks from in order to set back from the shoreline, which is the intent of,
Just call it beach movement rates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The interface of the sea
These movements.
and land that.
I mean, in California, we have bluff retreats, I mean, is It's huge bluffs, you
Yeah.
know? So, anyway.
Ruby, one thing that those
Yes,
pictures show in Cape Cod, and I'm not from Cape Cod, I live in Niamalo, and I don't know what it looked like in 1920, but if we were to go to Niihau, where there's no road, you're going to see a beach, then a dune with all kinds of dune vegetation, vegetated dune that retains that sand, both during the big storms and the no storms. Gets you through the hard parts. It looks like the road in Cape Cod was built on the dune.
Yeah,
Built it.
well, that happens a lot, this
And-
is where you see development, they grade it down.
And I just wanted to say one other thing.
Sure.
The analogy we see, if I can for a minute compare riparian zone stream banks
Yeah,
with ocean, is places in Anahola, Molowa'a, Wainiha, places where people cut all the riparian vegetation down so they could look at the pretty river. It's all eroded. It's the same in Aliamana. And when it's a nice view of the ocean, so you cut everything down. And then they wonder why it erodes. It's all the
yeah, and the vegetation issue is interesting because you also have areas, especially on the North Shore, where property owners are planting vegetation
on the beach.
on the beach and cause, really?
But it's against the law to do it.
Yeah, there's a new law that requires them to remove it because it's, yeah.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
what it is, there are some neighborhood watch that people up there.
Oh, they're-
No,
Oh.
they report it when you report it, when somebody else does something about it.
Yeah,
so.
but I'm not sure what's occurred yet with that, but there is that sort of fine balance between planting vegetation, you don't wanna plant, you wanna maintain your native vegetation that's there on the dunes and not cut it
It's
down.
illegal to do
Sheridan
Yeah.
Point Police Station. Yeah.
I think
Water.
that,
Yes,
I,
yes.
this beach profiling and monitoring, I think would be really exciting and important if we could somehow involve the kids in schools
Uh-huh,
in some
yes.
studies of how we analyze this data and talk
Yeah.
about it. Because
It's neat that
a lot of,
knows going on.
this is really exciting, like this spoke to Kalia, when yesterday it was just a smarmy mess, and then today was all calm, and the beach is totally different, but, you know, I could walk out in shallow sand for a long way, and then today is, you know, it's like, the kids would be really interested,
Yeah,
then they
yeah.
talk about the future of Kauai.
Yeah, I think the idea, as we were just talking to them, colleagues earlier about it, was to get, try to get the program started and then see what organizations, institutions are interested in keeping it going so it's sustainable, so it's not just dependent on Sea Grant. I plan on being here for a long time, I love it, but really getting the community involved in all these projects. Yeah.
I remember oceanography, how Chucky said that armament increases the intensity of the wave, how the wave will take the sand out. So we're seeing that like Aliamon and over in those areas. But my other question is, you mentioned two areas, accretion around river mouths. Is that typical where you get more sand than being deposited in river mouths?
You
Or
know,
it just happens to
I
be it's in
don't know the
line of it?
answer. I mean, I haven't been here long enough, and it certainly is my area of expertise, whether it's typical. I know in some areas it causes scouring, like I think on the Honolulu Bay, I don't know how to get my slide back up, but I think there is some localized scouring happening there at the river mouth. It really depends, like anywhere, right?
No, it's just that's another dynamic, and that sand mostly is not coming from the river.
No.
It's coming
No,
from the ocean itself, so it's
Yeah.
just a different
Like on a
dynamic, and then
whole
you got different currents going on
Mouth
and
there
stuff.
for Aliamani now is building out again.
I can't remember the exact figure, but the U.S. Geological Survey that was done in Honolulu estimated about 180,000 tons of sediment are discharged into the river, into the bay,
Yeah,
Honolulu Bay.
that's
When
one
they say
area where
sediment,
it's-
they don't mean terrestrials, they mean basalt, gravel, sand,
Yeah.
rocks. I mean, to them, to a geomorphologist, a boulder that big sediment.
Yeah.
Okay, and when Honolulu floods,
Yeah.
believe me, there's boulders a lot bigger
Yeah.
than that moving.
Interesting.
Do you see this, I know you haven't been here that long, but you worked in California a lot. Do you see this as a much more complex or more complex problem than in California? Just because of the fact that it's a
We're
round
not.
island and has more stuff?
California is way more developed, and
Uh-huh.
so you have, I wish I had brought some of my pictures, but like, I used to work in northern, around San Francisco, like Pacifica, for example, you have these huge apartment buildings that are about to fall in huge bluffs and whole cities, it's way more populated. I think it's a function of how many people are living here and close to the shoreline. And yeah, it's complex for me because it's a new environment and it's a new regulatory environment, but I think Kauai has a lot of promise because, it's just not that, it's a smaller area, so maybe relatively, you have your pockets of development, but I also, that's kind of why I like islands, because I think they're a lot more manageable to look at the big picture and, the management issues.
So we can be optimistic.
Yeah, I think there's always a silver lining.
Ruby, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thanks for having